Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me at benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcast because People of Distinction is a nationally and internationally syndicated show because of listeners like you. Our shows are available across all major podcast distributors as well as YouTube. And if you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. We appreciate the support. Continue to like and follow and sit back and strap in because on the line with us today, we have the impressive Danny B Lamont. And we're going to be discussing Danny's amazing book, Inspector Loop Visits America. Now, it's available for purchase through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, a whole host of other online resellers. Head on over there, pick up your copies today, and get lost in this amazing novel. And before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity and quickly point out the fact that Danny was brought to our network by one of the best publishing firms in the business. People you already know, I'm talking about Author Reputation Press. So if you're a writer out there, you've gone through your process and now you need help moving the masterpiece you just developed. Well, look no further than ARP, people, because this is exactly what they specialize in. Now, you're going to want to head on over to authorreputationpress.com and gather all the ways that their fantastic team is going to help you do just that. And listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Danny here on the line. Now, people, listen, when you start to do some research on his book, you're going to understand that his book is much more than just a catchy title. Now, first and foremost, it is absolutely a catchy title, all right? Inspector Loop Visits America. I'm intrigued, all right? I'm buying into it. I want to figure out more. Well, once you start to read the words on the pages, you're going to find out that this is an exciting mystery novel with some educational elements to be found inside as well. Now, Danny utilizes his background and experience to create the foundation for this book, to create this narrative. And he takes his years of experience through the FBI, couples it with his imagination and his humor, and now we got a success for a winning novel here, something you're not going to be able to put down and something you're going to love embarking upon. And listen, at the end of the day, Danny is the man of the hour. He's going to be able to articulate it all much better than I ever could. So sit back and strap in. Danny, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Mr. Cole, and thank you for having me.
Listen, it is our pleasure to have you, Danny. Thank you for writing this book, and thank you for agreeing to come on the network with us. We're thoroughly looking forward to this. I think your book balances wonderfully. Again, it has those educational undertones, but it's not an educational book, right? It's not preachy. It doesn't beat it over the head. This is a fun novel that I know our listeners are going to love, and I know your readers are as well. Before we jump into the words on those pages, Danny, I'm curious about your background. I know my listening audience is as well. Tell us more about yourself.
Originally, I'm from Jacksonville, New York, small hamlet in the Finger Lakes. I spent some time in the military, a year in Vietnam. After that, part-time jobs until I was hired by the FBI. It was there that I first was introduced to the Science of Fingerprints as a fingerprint examiner, going through a 13-week course where we classified, searched, and compared by hand any fingerprint cards unknown from other agencies to the known files at the FBI. I was there for 10 years, after which I found out about a job down here in Huntsville, Alabama, with the Huntsville Police Department. And I worked there for 26 years as a latent print examiner. I'm also a member of the International Association for Identification. This is an educational group. This makes sure they make certain that there are training opportunities out there for people to improve themselves, become better than what they were in the science. And there's been a lot of increases over the decades of how much has changed as to how we make comparisons, and the fact that these comparisons are then sent to someone else for a blind comparison. In other words, no reports are sent, just the latent prints themselves and the fingerprint cards.
There you have it. Danny, thank you very much for that. I have a whole host of questions that I'd love to get into. Man, your background is impressive. And just the concept of fingerprint analysis is something that is just baffling to me because, fingerprints are so intricate. I remember, and you can, of course, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember someone at some point, or maybe I heard it somewhere, that each individual fingerprint is similar to each individual snowflake on how no two are alike. And there is so many differences. They're microscopic, but when you really look closely, there's a lot of variation. And that to me just blows my mind. That is something that I find highly intriguing, and we're going to cover a lot of that. But let me slow it down here. Without further ado, let's talk about this wonderful book, Inspector Loop Visits America. Tell us more about the words on those pages, Danny.
Well, it's a story. I'm a storyteller. I use the written word to tell those stories. In this case, it happens you are introduced to a gentleman, Inspector Ulnar Lewis Loop, who happens to be the foremost authority in the science of fingerprints in this realm of fiction. He is named after the Ulnar Loop, which is the most common fingerprint pattern type. You are introduced to two other people, Peter Worrell and Cynthia Pauline Loop Worrell. Also, two types of fingerprint patterns. Peter Worrell is the plain whorl. Cynthia Pauline Loop Worrell is the second most common whorl type as a central pocket loop whorl. He is a crime scene investigator. She is a latent print examiner. And they both work in smaller Wormwood, Massachusetts, with the police department, solving crimes every day, depending on what the crimes are. If they're B&E autos, if they're burglaries, if they're robberies, murders, it makes no difference. And they use the science of fingerprints to do this. And so the entire book is, well, as you said, it's a little bit of a mystery. It tells a story, and it introduces you to a number of different people. Again, three of which are those three pattern types, or Inspector Ulnar Loop, Peter Worrell, and Cynthia Pauline Loop Worrell, and how they do their job, and how professional they are in doing it. And that will come across in the book.
People, I'm telling you, this is like learning a new language. I didn't realize that there were common patterns in terms of fingerprints. There is so much here that you are going to learn. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble. The book is called Inspector Loop Visits America by Danny B Lamont. You got to head on over there, pick up your copies today. Danny, as we transition here, man, let's cover inspiration next, okay? Because I know that there's an origin story, and this was a collective affair when it came to bringing this book to fruition. So talk to us about what inspired this novel.
Well, what inspired the book is, first of all, I invented and copyrighted 9 fingerprint people. 8 of them are named after the different 8 basic fingerprint pattern types. 2 types of loops, 2 types of arches, and 4 types of whorls. And I have an extra one just because of it's such an unusual pattern type, it's hardly ever come across by many examiners, may have never seen one. It's a type of tented arch. It's a very unusual one, though. So I invented these people, and that was to teach, and they all have a biography. And this is to help teach young people, children, third graders easily, about fingerprint patterns. And that's where the whole thing started. And later on, I thought, well, I know how to write. I learned that through my English comp courses at Calhoun Community College. So I'm going to go ahead and just write a book. That was the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And again, as with most books, it has a beginning. And this is introducing you to the inspector, how he's in Washington, D.C., his travels, his dealings with the FBI while in D.C., and then he's called to Boston, Massachusetts. But it's in Boston that he learns that there are some problems down in smaller Wormwood, Massachusetts. And he had bank robberies in this particular instance. And he goes down and he meets Peter Worrell and Cynthia Pauline Loop Worrell. And together, well, he observes, but he points out to what they are doing and how they do their job and how well they do their job and the professionalism in which they do it, which is very important in this field because it is a forensic science. Mm-hmm. It is an applied science. It's made up of different sciences, such as embryology and genetics are just two of them. And it's their professionalism that I try to make sure comes through, along with introducing people to different fingerprint terminology. Like Inspector Loop is originally from England, and he lives on Ridge Ending Lane. That's a type of fingerprint characteristic. Another type is an enclosure, and that is described in the book in smaller Wormwood, Massachusetts, how one highway comes into town, goes around French Fort Hill on either side, and then comes back together to form one highway, an enclosure. That's another one. The police station is locally known as Bifurcation Station. That's because there's one opening, you enter one main door, and then you split off either the right or the left to go either to the police department or the fire department. In other words, one ridge forking into two, forming what we call a bifurcation. So again, there's also that teaching in there, but I don't do it. I have my people do it. The narrator of the book is doing it. And I try to keep it humorous, but there are some very serious parts to it. But the thing is, in the book, there is no graphic violence. There is no graphic sex of any nature. It's a very clean book for all ages. There is one very violent part of the book, but I wrote around it, and in such a manner that I'm leaving it up to the reader to either accept it as it is or using their own imagination of what I meant when I said all normal means of identification were missing. And that's how I put it. No graphic violence whatsoever in there.
Love that.
I show people who care for one another, like a husband and wife or a girlfriend and boyfriend. But I don't take you back into the bedroom. I leave that to other writers, but that's not me. I don't write that way. I try to make it open for as many people who want to read it and learn a little something and maybe enjoy some light reading as well. And if they want to, they can read it to their children because there's nothing bad in there. And I leave it in such a manner that this is a family affair type book. If you want to have your children read it to them. Explain the different words. Learn something new. This is why I wrote the book.
I love that. Well, listen, in addition to what inspired you to write it, I do know that the subpart to this is the collective affair. right? I believe your sister was involved, and there are other people that you would like to credit with their involvement in the process. I'm going to give you an opportunity here before we transition to the next question. Go ahead and shout those individuals out, Danny.
Well, my sister Lori Daly was the artist who drew the fingerprint people's bodies in the coloring book for children to color. In another coloring book, she did all of the artwork. I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. My sister is the artist in the family. And as far as collective, yes, it's a very collective. Anyone who goes through writing a book, you have people who back you up, who have your back, such as my wife. She's very much involved in this because she helped proof the book.
Yeah.
I proof while I'm writing, but my wife helped proof the book afterwards, as well as a woman who's a very good friend of ours in Decatur, Alabama. Her name is Mary Morgan. She used to be a teacher, and she was very instrumental in her proofreading of the book. Mainly, it's not the spelling so much, but where to place commas, that sort of thing, which I learned back in English Comp is not an easy thing to do.
Listen, Danny, I'm right there with you, man. I have troubles to this day sometimes. Right? Those small grammatical errors, they just peer their head, and they come out in the most random times. Danny, as we start to close out, man, because people, listen, you already know you got to pick up your copies, okay? We're not going to give it all away here, but a curiosity for myself, during this writing process, was there any challenges that you had faced, or a particular challenging scene to write in terms of blending technical forensic details with engaging storytelling, right? And finding that balance between concrete, factual information with that fictional element. Any challenges along those lines?
No, not really, because I have a great and wonderful imagination. Mm-hmm. And my brain apparently never really shuts off when I'm awake. I could, at work, when I was doing latent print work, when I originally wrote the book, I would be doing comparison, which is very, very challenging. And yet, apparently, there's another part of my brain that decides to take a walk through the park. And in doing so, it comes up with these different things, these different ideas. And when I started writing the book, it was just to tell a story. And then I thought, no, let me introduce some fingerprint information into there. Let people learn things, because it's a very misunderstood science. And even when I talked to third graders, they understood it because I did a show and tell, and I showed them different things. And this is what I'm doing in the book. In my writing, I am showing people different fingerprint terminology. They're being introduced to these fingerprint people. Now, within that is a challenge, to introduce them in such a way that I'm not being overbearing. The other thing, again, as I mentioned, was to write around anything that's graphic, to leave it up to the imagination of the person reading the book, because I want them to think. I want them to learn without being overbearing.
Love that. Well, listen, he wants you to think. I want you to purchase this book so you can get lost in this journey, people, because I'm telling you, this is going to be one you want to add to your shelf one final time here. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's a whole host of other places. Simply type it into a Google search bar, and you're going to be greeted with them all right? Once again, the book is called Inspector Loop Visits America by Danny B Lamont. Trust me when I tell you, people, we've barely scratched the surface. There is a lot left on the bone there to be discovered for you to just jump into, all right, and enjoy yourself with. Head on over there today, pick up this amazing book, and while you're at it, learn a thing or two as well. Danny, this has been a true pleasure, man, an absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Again, thank you for having me. It's been very enjoyable.